Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Creative Practitioner Podcast. My name is Jonathan Curtis and I'm joined here by my friend, colleague, co-host and co-author Paul Hose. Between us, we have written a book called The Creative Practitioner, a guide to working in the arts. And this is a textbook, reference manual and best practice guide dedicated to the act of working, training, qualifying and professionalising within the creative industries. There are many challenges facing people who wish to work in the creative industries, be that the music industry, dance and drama, the visual arts, design, or even technology. And it can be very hard to know where to turn, how to get the required information, the experience, or what to do on a daily basis. So the idea behind this book and this podcast in general is to address the key elements, the key challenges faced by people looking to work in the art form, share some experience, and tackle the main pillars, which we have narrowed down to academic rigour and the act of professionalisation, teaching, performing and creating the art form, and ultimately running a business within the creative industries. As for myself, I have worked in the music industry for over a decade now. I started out as a freelance drum kit player, session musician and teacher, and over the years I've evolved into something to be more of an educator, composer and publisher. I've published many books within the music industry, specifically on drum kit pedagogy and composition. I have a private teaching practice. I run my own studio, which is actually where we are recording this episode today, and I still do freelance live and session work. So this is the perspective that I am coming from, and this is where I'm getting my experience from. So Paul, I want to start with you actually and give some of your plaudits, because I know you don't like doing that yourself.
No, I don't.
So I'm just going to run down a list and you can sit there and squirm while I'm doing it. You're a fellow of London College of Music. You're a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. You're a licentiate of both Trinity College London and RSL. You're CEO of MLC Group, which is like an ensemble of music schools.
Yeah.
Which I actually attended and then became a teacher at for a brief period in Nottingham.
Yeah.
And you are also an officer in training in what, leadership?
Leadership and management.
Leadership and management at Sandhurst, of all places. Aside from being a musician, and you've worked in the industry for quite a long time as a drummer.
Yeah, so I've...
Going back a bit.
So I registered as a professional, and by that I mean I registered with the Inland Revenue.
Yeah.
On November the 18th, 1992.
Wow. So I was 5 years old at the time.
Yeah, so that's knocking on 32 years, isn't it?
And I guess your experiences in that time have informed the reason that we're here today and the reasons for writing this book and the reasons for doing this podcast. Let's talk brass tacks for a minute. What is the book we've written? And it's your brainchild. You know, you did most of the research for this and the vast majority of the grunt work, as it were. What is it? What does it aim to achieve, and who's it for?
The book is for two types of reader, I suppose. You have the creative practitioner who might be a sole trader already out there or wanting to be a sole trader. And the book will help the reader understand the differences between creating their art, the reality that in order to earn a living, they might need a portfolio career, and that might include teaching or delivering workshops, that kind of, so teaching workshops in informal and formal settings. Mm-hmm. And regardless of the above two, you've got to be able to have systems and processes in place for governance. So are you compliant? Do you have insurance?
So the business aspect.
The business aspect.
Selling your art.
And managing your affairs.
Managing your affairs, which comes down to this sort of broader theme of professionalisation, right? Which is, I think, quite a big watchword that we used throughout the book.
So that's one reader. The other reader might already be an undergraduate studying the creative practitioner. So they might be doing music performance, film, television, dance.
Yeah.
The book is for them to help them with their studies. So it is a valid academic text, but it's also a beacon for those who want to trade or in the creative industries, or who might want to trade in the future.
There's a lot of best practice talk in there, isn't there?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Because that was something that I'd heard of before I started working on this with you, but I think I'd have been hard pressed to describe what best practice really means.
There's a lot of assumption, rightly, in everything that we do. So, whether you're taking your car for a service or buying a coffee, all the environments that you're in are safe. If you drop your youngster off for a music lesson, you assume that it's a safe place with safe people, safe practices.
Yeah, that's assumed, isn't it?
It's all assumed.
Yeah.
That's one element of best practice. The other element of best practice is we're talking about the academic rigour is your work of a standard that puts you on a level playing field with everyone else or above everyone else that you're competing with.
And understanding how to present it in that way that it's perceived to be so.
Yeah, but also, are you absolutely sure in what you're doing? Assured in what you're doing?
Right.
Pedagogy, lesson setups, do you have a good intro, a good main body, a good outro? Can you do a scheme of work? Do you know what your student's doing next week, even if they don't?
Right.
Are they on a pathway? Are you on a pathway?
Right.
Is it ad hoc?
Yeah, okay. So it falls, again, that I keep coming back to this word of professionalisation in the way you treat maybe a lesson plan, the way you give tuition. Does that apply to the way you produce art as well?
Art is a process, not a product.
Right.
So the production of art doesn't need a beginning, middle or end. If you are to monetize it, then it becomes something else.
Right. So there's a difference between producing the art form or practicing the art form as opposed to producing a product to sell.
Yeah. And I would ask that there is a distinction between product and service.
Right.
So the service of teaching, and this is philosophical, this is quite personal at this point.
Yeah.
Even the furtherance, the development of another human being in the art form is a process, not a product. So please don't come to us for notes per minute.
Yeah.
Or, we only did 3 examples on page 2 today.
Yeah.
Yeah, but weren't they just fantastic? and we learned how to apply them to 40,000 songs.
Yeah.
Now go and listen to those songs.
Yeah.
Art is a process. When you commercialize it and turn that art into a product, then it becomes business.
And this is where the best practice principles become.
Yeah, because that could include copyright.
Right.
We're going into the business end of it.
So we categorized this book, I think there's 5 parts, isn't there? There's the introduction, which gives an overview of the music industry.
Yeah.
There's academic rigour and professionalisation as an introduction to the concept.
Yeah.
And then there's teaching, performance and business. Do you want to just give us a brief overview of each one and why you felt they were important enough to give them their own topic?
Yeah, so let's go back to the introduction. We talk about the creative industries, don't we? So we go much broader than music, which obviously makes the book valid to anyone. And I would argue, actually, just to go to the end where we talk about business, anyone in business can do business creatively.
Yeah.
So the book's for anyone.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting argument to have in of itself.
Yeah.
Right. So back to the front, at the beginning of the book, we talk about the creative industries and try and perhaps enlighten people as to what those creative industries include.
More than just the obvious ones.
Yeah. Right. So the Department for Culture and Sport, it includes architecture.
Right.
So the creative industries as a contribution to the UK economy is vast.
Right.
So I hope it does enlighten and frustrate.
Yeah.
Because if you read it and go, well, that's completely irrelevant to me, well then ask why. Why? How do we make it relevant to you?
Yeah.
How do you make it relevant?
You can't ignore the fact that the industry is there, and if we are trying to sustain ourselves within that industry, we become part of it, right? It becomes relevant very quickly.
But how do you end up on the stage of how do you flip that relationship? Right? You go to an arena to watch a concert and you have a great time. How do you flip that so that people come and watch you on the stage?
Right.
And that's professionalisation. That's the business end of it.
Right.
As well as the performance end of it.
Right.
And I think the whole thing is a Venn diagram.
Yeah, okay.
You can't have
these overlapping concepts.
Yeah, they are interdependent.
Okay, so what's academic rigour?
So academic rigour, for one, readership, it will help them. What I've learned in my experience is when people come and do diplomas, they have the skill set, but they might not have the wherewithal to articulate their ideas. It's to help them research. It's to help them with the quality of how they're presenting. Because we talk about house styles, don't we? We talk about plagiarism. We talk about, and of course, plagiarism is valid for the production of the art.
Sure.
So it's a again, you can't have it in isolation.
Yeah.
But what I find sadly is people fail these professional diplomas because they'll just try and answer a question, whereas the question poses the need for research.
So you see this a lot because you adjudicate or examine these diplomas, right?
Yeah, I do. I assess level 4 and level 6 diplomas.
And I think you've said to me before, it's quite startling how many don't make it.
It is. It's upsetting because obviously people go in with leading with their heart.
And these are global, right? These is not just UK candidates.
No. This is quite literally global.
Right.
I would hope that those people would look at our book and look at the academic rigour chapter and not skim it.
Right.
That's the bit.
It's there for a reason, isn't it? How you present yourself, whether it's in an academic context, a commercial context, or just generally.
Now, for the practitioner, the person who's not looking for formal qualifications, academic rigour will help them tell their own story in a consistent way. And we drift into branding here, but you need
how you present yourself and your image
consistently.
Okay, right.
That's something you do very well.
Yeah.
Organisations that I work in, we spend a lot of money having brand guidelines prepared, and we have a brand. We have a document that says we have a brand.
Yeah, I don't have one of those.
Yeah, but interestingly, what's interesting about that is that we collaborated with a graphic designer.
Yeah.
So we acknowledged that it wasn't our skill set. So let's go to a creative practitioner where it is their skill set and have our brand developed.
Right. You talk about collaboration a lot in that way, don't you? As part of the recipe of success in the business aspect of things, collaboration.
And we talk about the need to go macro with thinking rather than micro.
Trying to do everything yourself all the time.
It's good luck.
It's a lonely place. It's a lonely place. I've learned to delegate because I obviously don't work as part of a team in my day-to-day life. I run my own practice and all this sort of thing. But those things that we talk about, they're things that I think if I had been aware of them 10 years ago, I would have got to where I am now a little bit sooner without as much heartache.
And that in itself then is the reason to have the book.
Yeah. It's funny, the things that you find yourself thinking about and then you read them and you go, yeah, okay, that might be what I'm thinking about. I wish I'd been aware of that consciously.
Yeah, I mean, you answered my question actually.
So, and then we get into, I guess, the doing, right? The performing and the creating and the teaching.
Yeah.
But it's not, it sounds like I'm just being a salesman here, but it's not just telling people how to do their own art, is it?
No, it does. It actually doesn't.
It doesn't touch on specific how to do.
No. It gives credible examples in every chapter, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Whether so. In the performing, it poses questions even relating to, do you have a mixing desk? Do you have lighting? Is your stage big enough?
Yeah.
Is it safe?
Safe, yeah.
Right. Then in the teaching side, do you know what a scheme of work is? Do you know what a lesson plan is? Do you know what pedagogy is? And then here's, I don't know how many, at least 10 theorists that we briefly. And again, that relates to academic rigour because the 10 theorists that we discuss, the academic rigour, if it does its bit properly, it should let's go find out more.
Yeah, it's signposting.
Yeah. Well, let me go on with that. In that, I think it's, and if you disagree, please say so, but I think it's fair to say that in a modern creative practitioner needs a portfolio.
Which was one of the big chapters that I think I really enjoyed working on, because
Yeah.
I was basically describing what I do.
Yeah. and so that's why we have the pillars of the book.
Right, that portfolio aspect of the whole practice.
Yeah, but you can't bemoan people that are doing well teaching in schools on a peri level or any other level if you do not have the academic credentials that get you through the door.
Yeah.
Hence the vocational side of it.
Right.
But if that's not required, if you're there to facilitate a workshop, you'll still need to be a safe person.
Yeah. And be able to convey that workshop in a way that's suitable to your audience.
Yeah.
Whether they're primary school kids or university kids or whatnot.
So it is. So again, everything is everything. They got the whole Venn diagram approach to being a creative practitioner. Did the book help you?
Well, it did. And it's because I think a lot of these conversations aren't happening. I have been doing what I do now since I was 24.
Yeah.
And I'm now closer to 40. And I've never had to consider some of the things that I've ended up writing about or working with you writing about. We talked about the fire extinguisher, just for argument's sake, or a safeguarding course or a first aid course. If someone comes in here and grazes their knee, I've got a plaster for them. But if they collapse, am I trained to deal with that if the parents are not here?
Yeah.
That's a scary thought for someone who just wants to play the drums for a living.
Yeah.
So I think the idea with what we're talking about here, you and I have had a lot of conversations over the years, and a lot of them have been pertinent to the act of practicing in the professional sense that have very little to do with the art form itself.
Yeah.
Right? These things that we've seen, we've done lots of things together, from teaching and playing together to hosting clinics and workshops and all sorts of things. And you see kind of the nitty-gritty underside of how people do business. And it's not always as you would hope, let's say.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways that somebody like me 10, 15 years ago can trip themselves up and do themselves disservice.
Yeah.
I remember very early on, when I was much closer to 25, having this mindset that the work will speak for itself. And I do stand by that to a degree. I do think work does speak for itself, but the presentation and the professionalization of that and all of the other things that come with it, I can't run it. If I just take my teaching, I can't run a business just by knowing myself that I'm a good teacher.
Somebody else has to know.
Somebody else has to recognize that. And if somebody else recognizes that and leaves me a review, well, that review is valuable.
Yeah.
And if somebody else comes here and they see that I'm prepared to deliver, let's just say the graded qualifications, that gives them an air of comfort or confidence that I know what I'm talking about. And again, suddenly this is where you find yourself on a Monday morning doing things that are quote unquote work, that do not comprise having sticks in hand and playing.
Let me ask you this. This rhetorical. This is a trap. Okay.
Okay.
You're very happy with the thought that you want to get better as an artist, to continue the never-ending journey of becoming better on your instrument.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't that be true in the realm of becoming a better teacher?
Or a business person. I suppose this is the disconnect that a lot of artists see between their art form, and there's this stigma of selling out, isn't there? And becoming part of the corporation.
Yeah, there is definitely the desire to not conform.
Yeah.
But the point I was trying to steer you towards was that as a creative, you are already a master of CPD.
Right.
You will continually, undertake professional development for the rest of your life.
But I have to.
So why not formalize it?
Right. That was something I took a long time to understand when we were having the early draft discussions. That was something I think I needed a bit of time to understand when I was even reading the first drafts you submitted, because I remember coming back to you and saying, well, I'm not quite sure what this is doing here or why this is here, because it's very easy, I think, to see a textbook as being very, very prescriptive.
Yeah.
Do this.
Yeah.
And that's very difficult to do when you're considering the arts generally, plural, right? If it's not just how to be a professional drummer, or even just something hyper-specific like how to be a drum teacher, it's a lot easier to be prescriptive. But if you're dealing with somebody that's at college for lighting, or somebody that's never been to college but does textile design and wants to sell that, it becomes very difficult to prescribe specific activities and things to do, whereas making people aware of particular concepts and ideas and things like the best practice or professionalisation as a concept is much more broad and applicable, right?
It is, but even with all of the examples that you've just given, there are accepted norms, standards, conventions. Yeah. But what are they?
Yeah. Are we aware of what they are?
Where's the book of conventions for lighting?
Yeah.
For textiles? For you'll do a degree in whatever, but then if you want to teach, you need to do a PGCE.
Yeah.
And it's just that bit on the end that says you know how to deliver something to someone else.
Right.
An independent body has verified that I can formalise my thinking and convey it to another person.
Do you think a lot of creatives take that for granted?
I don't think they think about it until they hit upon the fact that they might need a portfolio career. They might not even call it a portfolio career. They just might think, do you know what? I need to teach a bit because I'm skint.
It's very ad hoc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have raged against this all of my career. You know I have. I'm against the lottery of what we call out of school setting.
Yeah.
So that's the realm that I work in. That's the realm that you work in. It's a lottery. We can all have fantastic websites. We're all marketeers.
Yeah.
Prospectors.
Yeah.
But to have something quietly sat on the wall that says, no, don't take my word for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's an international body that recognises me.
Yeah.
It can be a valuable thing for one's imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
An academic rigour talks about academia, but does it go beyond that to a broader mindset that I think creative people might want to consider adopting for everything they do? How does that work, and how does it apply on a broad level?
Well, on a broad level, and again, I think this was, I hope anyway, that this was an eye-opener for you, because you have an academic background. Yeah. In the traditional sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And whether you realise it or not, it's enabled you to write websites, copy for your books, CD, liner notes. Yeah. It's enabled you to articulate yourself and tell your story. Right. To whoever the listener is, whether it's this podcast, a parent of a young student, an adult student, networking and getting a deal to go on a tour, you can tell your story. Through academic rigour learned in an actual academic context, something I perhaps took for granted. Yeah, and also with that, this book, and you know, maybe these listeners, university isn't for everyone, is it? Sure. So, but there is still a standard. There is an expectation. So this again harks back to professionalisation in how you present yourself, present your work, and academic rigour is kind of like the practical side of that, but also the conceptual side of that. Yeah. So one example might be the ability to do research that enables you to know what you might be able to charge. Right. So if I've got a skill and I might want to monetize it, I need to know the ins and outs of presenting that, how to charge for it, how to run it, how to sell it, how to build a basic site. Right. That is research, and then you apply the research. Most of us, have to develop secondary skills. Yeah, not directly linked to our art form. Yeah, look at you and I today. Yeah. and this is one part of it. And then we need to research how to actually enable others to hear it.
Yeah, how to promote a podcast.
Yeah, yeah. So if you are wanting to be a sole trader in the creative industries as a creative practitioner, you will need many skills. That planning, forecast of events, whether that's the annual fire extinguisher check, the renewal of the insurance policy,
pat testing.
Yeah. I think it comes from the Royal Engineers. I'm sure somebody out there is going to correct me, but they do this. So what? And it sounds quite abrasive,
right?
But we're going to publish a book. So what?
Yeah.
And it's not off the it's not dismissive. It's okay then. So what do we need?
Yeah.
Great. Well, we need this. So now what do we need?
Yeah.
And you kind of peel it back to the point of, okay, the goal still remains. Mm-hmm. It's over there, but actually it's much further away now.
Yeah. All these steps to consider.
Yeah.
For the vision to be realised.
Yeah. And what resources do I need for those steps? That could be human resources, could be financial, could be space. You might need a studio.
Yeah.
Might need a photo session.
Yeah.
Might need an artist to do a cover.
And those additional skills, secondary skills we talked about, if you can do any of that yourself, you're saving yourself expense as you produce that product as well.
And or you take the decision
to delegate.
To delegate.
Yeah.
Or collaborate.
Yeah. Nice.
And then you've got your microeconomy because you've engaged somebody else.
Right. It's a lot to consider, isn't it, when you first start out, all of the things that go into maintaining a business, when in your mind you just want to play the drums. Right.
Then you couple that with a very restless young version of somebody.
Is that professionalisation then at play?
That's the painful evolution.
Right. And is that necessary, do you think, to survive in today's creative industry? Or is there still a space for the starving artist?
I would love to hope that people don't need to suffer for their art in that sense anymore. I'm not talking about mental health at this point.
Sure.
But one would really hope that nobody ought to go hungry.
Let me play devil's advocate then. When we finalised the layout of the book, we broke it down. We started with the overview of the industries.
Yeah.
Then we introduced this idea of academic rigour. And then we broke it down into teaching, performing, and the business side of things. And a lot of the sort of narrative thread that ran through that was to do with the idea of considering vocational qualifications within the various art forms.
Yeah.
And I think we made quite an effort in the introductory text to talk about not everybody needs a qualification.
Yeah.
Not everybody needs to be a professional, right?
Right.
Why was the main narrative thread centered around things like vocational training and things like that? Is that something you think is important?
Well, it of itself is important. Mm-hmm. Education is important. Even in its most informal sense.
Yeah.
Watch the news, educate yourself.
Sure.
But not everybody has an equal opportunity. So some people won't go to university because they think they can't, or that it's not for them. But education comes to people at different stages of their lives. So they might be adult learners and want to formalise their thinking. But also, especially for musicians, I'm not so sure about other creative types, maybe they can let us know, but musicians want to belong. They want to be in a band. Mm. So having a credible third party say that you're okay is helpful.
Gives you a bit of verification, validation.
Otherwise we, in our various practices, wouldn't offer these qualifications, would we?
No.
And we wouldn't. There would be no need for you to list my credentials at the beginning of this.
Sure, but is it something that somebody listening to this who maybe is a prospective professional, or aspiring professional in their particular art form, is it something they should feel they need to do, as opposed to something they just might want to consider?
It very much depends on the application. So, as an example, we talk about creating the art.
Yep.
teaching the art, and then facilitating the governance of the art.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's basically it, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you develop a career and therefore a reputation whereby people are very happy to just seek you out and come to you, you may never need a formal qualification.
Right.
If, however, you want to teach in a school or a similar institution where they're looking for, on their job applications, a minimum standard.
Right.
And you might be the best. And again, there's another topic, a sort of subtopic here: the difference between performing your art and communicating it and growing another person, i.e., teaching.
Yeah,
it's not necessarily the same thing.
Sure.
So you might be the most wonderful performing artist, but might not be able to structure a lesson or a scheme of work.
Right.
And these formal pathways will help you do that.
Right.
And then of course you can communicate to others. It's an academic version of your album, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, well, here's my art.
Yeah.
Here's my credentials.
Yeah.
Fuse the two together. I'm therefore I've thought about myself from a business perspective.
Right. Okay.
And that's the holy trinity of the book.
Sure. So these are things that a lot of people don't consider, maybe if they're thinking about, I mean, I certainly didn't, setting up a studio to teach and have students in. If you've got students coming in, they need to be safe, right?
Yeah.
They need to have a fire exit or a fire extinguisher, and there needs to be, I mean, I'm looking at my hi-hat now, the number of times I've watched students in the past have to climb around the hi-hat because there were cases on the floor and cables and things like that. I guess that falls into this realm of professionalization generally, of considering the broader implications of things that go beyond the practice.
There's too much assumed knowledge.
Right. Okay.
So you think about your studio, think about where we are.
Yeah.
You're talking about fire exits and all the rest of it, and you're talking about the hi-hat. Well, is there a first aid kit?
Professionalization in that sense is not art specific, is it? It's not about being a drummer.
No, it's about practicing, exploring that word practice, whether it's dental practice, solicitor's practice, private teaching practice.
Do you think there is something specific about artists that makes them more, they tend to neglect this side more than other professions, or is that an unfair?
No, I think it is. I think it's fair.
Yeah.
Generally, creative people tend not to want to conform, and they want a sense of autonomy in their working practice, and that's fine. But everybody's accountable, and everybody's accountable in the eyes of the law. So, and this isn't to frighten people.
But it's like the fire extinguisher or the first aid kit, isn't it? It's not an issue until it's an issue. It's not an issue until something comes along that you don't expect.
So why be frightened of it?
Yeah.
Why not just make it a non-issue? Of course I've got a fire extinguisher. Haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that way around. What do you mean you haven't got a fire extinguisher?
So I wonder if people will be listening to this and wondering what this has to do with the arts in general, and a book that purports to be a guide for the creative practitioner. Why have we started talking about fire extinguishers and first aid kits? What's that indicative of in terms of the broader perspective of that?
I suppose everybody assumes, and indeed has the right, to feel safe. Mm-hmm. Safety is personal, and it manifests in different ways.
Yeah,
the environment that you work in needs to be fit for purpose, needs to be safe.
Yeah,
and where that comes into professionalization and working within the arts is that everything that you put your eyes on or your hands on costs money, has a cost, and that needs to reflect the fee that you charge. Because not only are you talking about your expertise, you're talking about your practice. So what does it mean to have a lesson with Jonathan Curtis and go beyond the art, talk about the environment? It's quite an idyllic environment. It's a safe environment. Yeah. It's a purpose-built environment.
Yeah. So this feeds into a broader perspective, a perception of professionalism from customers coming in from the outside, right? If they come in and see a safe, let's say well-lit, purpose-built environment, it's perceived as a professional setting, and this is a professional service.
So your perceived value increases immediately.
Right. So is this something then, kind of paralleling my previous question, is this something that artists generally fall foul of when presenting their own work?
They can, and often it's because they can't help it. They don't have the environment. Like, so for example, if you any kind of art form really, there aren't many places that they can practice their art because they can't charge for their art properly, because people won't pay for the art properly. They can't afford these premises.
It's a bit of a downward spiral at that point, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's almost like the book could be, a manifesto. It could be a political revolution because and I think we talk about this, that there is an acceptance in the high end art of that's streaming services for audio visual, cinema, concerts where people are paying, the cheap ticket is £100.
Yeah.
That's all taken care of. People are quite happy with that. What they won't do is pay for us on the ground.
Yeah. A door fee for a band playing at a local venue or something like that.
So everything suffers. The quality of music education suffers. The quality of growing as an artist suffers. The quality of output and contributing to society suffers.
So does an artist who wants to make a sustainable living, do they have to accept that that's a business and they have to run themselves as a business? And should that put them off, or should that be something that is embraced?
It should be embraced. But if you go back to when I was a kid trying to do it, in Nottingham, there was no industry, there was no business. You were almost doomed to fail, even when you told the bank manager, so what line of you want a business account, what line of business are you in?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
I remember when we got our first mortgage, they discounted my income, and they had to take it all on my wife's income, because they discounted musician as a sole trader as a solid profession. Yeah. So even though I had, humble as they were, I had a few years worth of books, it was completely discounted at the bank for a mortgage.
Yeah.
Whereas these days, what are we in, 2024? In 2017, I switched over to a limited company, and suddenly banks are much more willing to deal with you.
Yeah. I mean, I find it unfair, and you'd need to go to like policymaker level.
Yeah.
And why not? That's why I'm a fellow of the RSA.
Yeah.
If the nation is willing to take money off you for taxation, then it ought to help you live at the other end.
Yeah. They can't charge you tax, but then also say, well, your income doesn't count if you're just a musician.
That seems unfair, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think the idea of a portfolio career is something we should talk about on the next one. I think that deserves its own segment, because that's essentially what I do. My career is a portfolio career.
And I think that's a happy place, right?
I love it. But it's interesting, when I was working on this book with you, writing and working on the chapter, it's not something I ever decided. I didn't sit down one day and go, right, I'm going to develop a portfolio career for myself.
Yeah.
I'd started doing that, and then maybe with your help and others, I started to learn what it was and embraced it. But it was a natural response to what I had to do in order to make enough money to survive.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of formalized in book form, and writing it and editing that section, it was very eye-opening on, I have had to do that. And I did have to think about that, and I did have to do that when I wouldn't normally have thought that. And again, it's this idea of the business side and the presentation side outstripping the act of just, in my case, hitting a drum.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else you wanted to add today?
It's the formalisation of the thinking and the doing that will help the success.
Well, I like that. I think that's a nice way to end. So the Creative Practitioner is out now. It's available physically, digitally, Kindle, worldwide. Thank you very much for listening if you've made it this far. And I hope we'll see you next time on the Creative Practitioner Podcast. Episode 2, I think we will dedicate to portfolio careers. Paul, thanks very much. See you next time.
Thanks, Johnny. See ya.